Ms. Hanabusa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like to follow the basically that line, and in one of the CODELs that I took, we went to NASCO, which is, of course, as you know, in San Diego, and one of the, I guess the person who runs the institution there said that the Jones Act was extremely critical because of the fact that what we cannot rely upon is for the defense industry to be the shipbuilder and being the only customer, and that in fact you need the commercial intervention to come in, especially when we have those dips. And I think that was along your lines about workforce, that we are going to, if we dip too low, we're going to lose that critical mass, and we've already lost a lot of that talent pool. And as a result, we are going to even fall further down in terms of our ability to build the ships. So in that light, Mr. O'Rourke, can you go back about what you were saying was the distinction in how the procurement works on shipbuilding versus any other form of military expenditure, and then whether or not there is a resolution or some way that we can fix that?
It has to do with the format of the DOD annual DOD appropriations bill, and if you look at the actual language of the law, you'll see that most of the accounts are appropriated at the full account level. Right. The exception to that within the procurement title of the DOD Appropriations Act is the paragraph that appropriates funds for shipbuilding. That paragraph is structured to call out funding levels for individual shipbuilding programs. So if the sequestration law is applied at the individual program, project, and activity level, the PPA level, then you can run into a scenario in which each of those programs gets their funding shaved by whatever the arithmetic percentage is, and you can get into multiple situations of not being able to build 3/4 or 4/5 or 9/10 of a ship. The fix to that potentially is a 1990, if I recall, amendment to the sequestration law, which allows the Defense Department to propose a reallocation of the defense budget prior to the imposition of sequestration. That is a proposal that the executive branch would make to Congress, and Congress would have the choice of whether to approve it or not. If the DOD took advantage of that authority, and there's some question as to whether they can or not under the BCA, but if it is judged that they can, and if the executive branch then chooses to in fact do so, they could restructure the allocation of spending within the defense budget in a way that could reduce the disruptions to individual shipbuilding programs, probably by bumping up the funding for some shipbuilding programs and perhaps sacrificing entire ships in other shipbuilding programs so that you don't run into a situation where all the programs are disrupted by being shaved across the board.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the uniqueness of the shipbuilding program is that we allocate by a particular ship, and that when we cut with sequestration, for example, across the board, all of those ships would not have enough funds to actually go forward, because they would not go forward unless the full funding is there, because they would have to take the risk that the full funding would not be there. And we do not afford in the shipbuilding line item, or whatever way we want to refer to it, the ability to shift funds or reallocate at the discretion of the military. Am I understanding you correctly?
I think you are. It has to do with the format, the actual language of the law of the DOD Appropriations Act. And each year when it's passed, it's only the shipbuilding account, the SCN account, that calls out individual programs within the account as a routine matter from year to year.
Does anybody know why that became the practice?
I think that's simply a matter of tradition of how the format of the DOD Appropriations Bill has evolved down through the decades.
But is there any specific reason why just shipbuilding was given that privilege of not being able to be shifted in any way?
There may have been such a reason originally, but I'm not aware of what it might have been.
Have we ever seen this kind of potential threat to shipbuilding in recent history?
And there was a sequestration scenario that was investigated during the time of the multiple continuing resolutions a year or two ago, and we ran into exactly this situation where there was about a $1 or $2 billion shortfall in shipbuilding, but the funds from the prior year that might carry through in the CR were not properly aligned with the individual programs for the next year. And the misalignment was actually between $5 and $6 billion, even though the total account difference was only $1 to $2 billion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hanabusa.